Elena Corvus wiped the sweat from her forehead as she navigated the rocky terrain of Valdris Prime. The purple sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the crystalline formations that dotted the landscape like frozen flames. She had been tracking the geological anomalies for 3 days now, her scanner beeping intermittently as it registered unusual energy signatures beneath the planet's crust. The frontier settlement of Ironhold was counting on her findings. As their lead surveyor, Elena's job was to locate viable mineral deposits that could sustain the growing colony. 7,000 souls depended on the resources she could uncover. The responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she had never been one to shy away from hard work. A strange sound echoed through the canyon, a deep rumbling that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. Elena paused, her hand instinctively moving to the emergency beacon on her belt. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by what could only be described as a cry of pain. Against her better judgment, Elena followed the sound. She climbed over a ridge and found herself looking down into a narrow gorge. What she saw made her blood run cold. A dragon lay sprawled across the rocks below, its magnificent body broken and bleeding. One of its wings was twisted at an impossible angle, trapped beneath a massive boulder. The creature's scales shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting between shades of sapphire and silver in the dying light. Elena knew about the dragons of Valdris Prime. Everyone did. They were ancient beings, predators that ruled the skies and kept mostly to themselves in the mountain ranges. The settlement had a strict policy regarding them. Stay away. Do not engage. Do not provoke. 3 colonists had died in the early days when they had ventured too close to a nesting site. But as Elena watched the dragon struggle weakly against its prison, something shifted inside her. This was not a monster or a threat. This was a living being in agony. The dragon's eye, a brilliant amber color that seemed to glow from within, turned toward her. In that gaze, Elena saw intelligence and awareness that transcended any animal she had ever encountered. She saw desperation and pain, and something else. A silent plea for help. The descent into the gorge was treacherous. Loose stones skittered away beneath Elena's boots, and twice she nearly lost her footing. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from exertion but from fear. What was she doing? This creature could kill her with a single swipe of its claws. Yet she continued down, driven by an instinct she could not name. When she finally reached the bottom, Elena approached slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and unthreatening. The dragon watched her every step, its breathing shallow and rapid. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent. Its scales caught the light like precious gems, and despite the blood and dirt, there was an elegance to its form that took her breath away. Elena knelt beside the injured wing, her hands trembling as she opened her emergency medical kit. She had supplies meant for human injuries, but the basic principles of medicine were universal. Stop the bleeding. Stabilize the damage. Manage the pain. She filled a syringe with a powerful analgesic and approached the dragon's shoulder, finding a spot between 2 scales where the skin looked softer. The dragon tensed as the needle pierced its flesh, but it did not strike at her. Instead, it made a low sound, almost like a sigh, as the medication began to take effect. Elena worked through the fading light, using everything in her kit to treat the wounds she could reach. She cleaned lacerations with antiseptic spray, applied synthetic skin patches to the worst tears in the wing membrane, and used her bone stabilizers to set the fractured wing as best she could. Hours passed. The purple sun disappeared below the horizon, and Elena worked by the light of her headlamp. Her water supply ran dry. Her knees ached from kneeling on the hard stone. But she did not stop. When she finally finished splinting the wing using pieces of her surveying equipment, Elena sat back on her heels, exhausted. The dragon's massive head turned toward her, and their eyes met again. In that moment, something passed between them. An understanding. A connection that transcended species and language. The dragon opened its mouth, and Elena tensed, expecting fire or teeth. Instead, the creature made a sound unlike anything she had heard before. It was musical, harmonic, resonating in multiple tones at once. The dragon's scales began to glow softly, patterns of light rippling across its body in waves. It was beautiful and strange and somehow felt like gratitude. Voices called from above, breaking the moment. The search party from Ironhold had finally located her position. Elena looked up to see lights moving along the canyon rim. The dragon saw them too, and panic flashed in its amber eyes. It tried to rise, to flee, but its broken body would not cooperate. Elena made her decision instantly. She grabbed her gear and scrambled away from the dragon, moving to the opposite side of the gorge. When she reached a point where she could be seen from above, she waved her arms and shouted. Security Chief Thomas Brennan was the first to reach her, his weathered face creased with concern. "Corvus, we've been looking everywhere. Your beacon never activated." "I fell," Elena lied smoothly. "Hit my head. I think I blacked out for a while." "We heard sounds," another searcher said, a young woman named Celeste Park. "Big sounds. Like something massive moving through the canyons." "Probably rock slides," Elena said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "The geological instability in this area is significant." As they helped her climb back to safe ground, Elena glanced over her shoulder once. The dragon had lowered its head, hiding in the shadows of the gorge. Their eyes met one final time across the distance, and Elena saw something in that gaze that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Recognition. Memory. Promise. She had no idea if the creature would survive. No idea if it would remember what she had done. But as she walked back toward the settlement with the search party, Elena felt a strange certainty settle in her chest. This was not the end of their story. Somehow, some way, she knew their paths would cross again. She just had no idea how soon that day would come, or how drastically it would change everything. 4 years later, everything would change. 4 years later, the promise would be kept. 4 years transformed Ironhold from a struggling outpost into a thriving community. The population had swelled to nearly 12,000, with new housing districts spreading across the valley like a patchwork quilt. Elena had been promoted to Chief of Colonial Development, and her days were filled with planning meetings, resource allocation, and endless paperwork. She rarely ventured into the wild anymore, though she thought often about that night in the gorge. The dragons had become more visible over the years. They flew in the distance, circled the mountains, but never came close to the settlement. It was an uneasy peace, a mutual agreement to coexist without interaction. Elena sometimes wondered if the dragon she had saved was among those distant silhouettes against the sky. The morning the sensors detected the incoming fleet, Elena was reviewing construction plans for the new water treatment facility. The emergency alarm shattered the quiet of her office, its harsh wail sending her heart into her throat. She ran to the command center, where Governor Damian Cross stood before the main display screen, his face ashen. "What is it?" Elena asked, pushing through the crowd of technicians and officials. "Reavers," Damian said quietly. "A full harvesting fleet." Elena stared at the display in horror. Dozens of ships appeared as red dots on the screen, converging on Valdris Prime like a swarm of predators. Everyone knew about the Reavers. They were nomadic raiders who stripped planets of their resources, leaving nothing but barren wastelands in their wake. 8 colonies had fallen to them in the past decade. "How long do we have?" Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. 60 hours, a technician replied. "Maybe less if they accelerate." The command center erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, shouting suggestions, proposals, desperate plans that all amounted to the same thing. They were helpless. Ironhold had no military vessels, no weapons capable of fighting a space battle. Their defenses were designed to keep out wildlife, not an armada of warships. Elena felt the walls closing in around her. 12,000 people. Families. Children. All about to be slaughtered or enslaved. She thought of little Mira, the 8-year-old girl who always waved to her from the schoolyard. She thought of old Gregor, who ran the bakery and made bread that smelled like home. All of them, all of those lives, about to be extinguished. She left the command center and walked to the outer wall of the settlement, needing air, needing space to think. The purple sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. In the distance, the mountains rose like ancient sentinels, and Elena could see movement in the air. Dragons. Dozens of them, circling and diving in patterns she had never seen before. One dragon broke away from the others, flying directly toward the settlement. As it drew closer, Elena's breath caught in her throat. The scales were sapphire and silver, shimmering with that distinctive iridescent quality. The left wing bore old scars, healed fractures that had never quite set perfectly straight. It was her dragon. After 4 years, she recognized it instantly. Alarms blared across the settlement as the dragon entered the defensive perimeter. Guards rushed to their posts, weapons charging. Elena ran along the wall, waving her arms and shouting. "Don't shoot! Hold your fire!" Security Chief Brennan's voice crackled over the communication system. "All units, stand down. I repeat, stand down." The dragon landed in the central plaza with earth-shaking force. People scattered in panic, screaming and running for cover. But the dragon did not attack. It stood perfectly still, its amber eyes scanning the crowd until they found Elena on the wall. Their gazes locked, and Elena felt that same connection from 4 years ago. Recognition. Memory. Understanding. She climbed down from the wall and walked across the plaza. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to keep moving forward. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she approached the massive creature. "You remember," Elena whispered. "You actually came back." The dragon lowered its head until it was level with Elena's face. Its breath was warm, carrying that strange scent of sulfur and something almost like honey. Then the dragon made that sound again, the harmonic resonance that vibrated through her bones. Its scales began to glow, patterns of light forming shapes in the air between them. Elena watched in wonder as the bioluminescence created images. A fleet of ships. Destruction raining from the sky. Then dragons, hundreds of them, rising to meet the threat. Working together. Fighting together. "You know about the Reavers," Elena said, understanding dawning. "You've come to help us." The dragon's glow intensified, confirming her words. It lifted its head and released a call that shook the ground, a sound that echoed across the valley and up into the mountains. The sky began to darken, but not with night. Wings. Hundreds of wings blotting out the fading sunlight. Dragons poured from the mountain ranges, their massive forms filling the air above Ironhold. They circled in formation, their calls joining together in a chorus that made the buildings tremble. It was terrifying and magnificent and utterly impossible. The dragons had not abandoned humanity. They had come to stand with them. Governor Cross appeared beside Elena, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What is happening?" "They're offering to fight," Elena said. "They're willing to help us defend the colony." "But why? Why would they risk themselves for us?" Elena reached out and placed her hand on the dragon's snout, feeling the warmth of those iridescent scales. "Because 4 years ago, one human chose mercy over fear. And they remember. Dragons remember everything." The council meeting that followed was heated and desperate. Half the officials wanted to trust the dragons. The other half thought it was madness to rely on creatures they barely understood. But as the hours ticked away and the Reaver fleet drew closer, the choice became clear. Accept the dragon's help or face certain destruction. Elena worked through the night with a team of xenobiologists and communication specialists, trying to establish better understanding with the dragons. The sapphire and silver dragon, whom Elena had begun calling Arya in her mind, remained close throughout the process. They used light projections, hand signals, and carefully modulated sounds to communicate. Arya showed them battle formations through her bioluminescence. She demonstrated how dragons could carry explosives close to enemy ships, how their natural abilities could disrupt targeting systems, how coordinated attacks could overwhelm even superior technology. It became clear that dragons had fought before. Perhaps not the Reaver specifically, but they understood combat. They understood war. Young scientist Finn Martinez translated one of Arya's messages that made Elena's heart ache. The dragon was showing an image of herself falling, wounded again. Then more dragons taking her place. They knew the cost. They knew some of them might not survive. And they were willing to pay that price. Why? Damien Cross asked, his voice breaking. Why sacrifice yourselves for people you don't even know? Arya turned her amber eyes to Elena, and the connection between them flared bright and true. Elena understood before the words even formed in her mind. Because one person showed kindness when it mattered most. Because mercy deserves to be repaid. Because some debts transcend species and time. Because, Elena said softly, sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change everything. The preparations consumed the final hours before the Reaver fleet arrived. Engineers designed harnesses that could carry mining charges, modified to detonate on proximity. Medical teams set up field hospitals capable of treating both humans and dragons, learning as they went. Colonists trained in basic dragon communication, understanding warnings through light patterns and harmonic calls. Elena worked until exhaustion made her hands tremble, but she could not stop. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Arya falling from the sky, wounded beyond saving. The thought made her chest tight with fear. She had spent 4 years wondering if the dragon survived her injuries. Now she might lose her again, this time forever. Arya stayed close during the preparations, as if sensing Elena's distress. Once, when Elena paused to drink water, the dragon made a soft sound and lowered her head. Elena reached up and stroked the warm scales, feeling the strength contained within that magnificent form. "Promise me you'll be careful," Elena whispered. Arya made a sound that Finn translated through his equipment. "Careful is for those who have nothing worth fighting for. We have everything." The Reaver fleet entered orbit as the purple sun rose on the third day. 28 ships materialized on the sensors, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. 3 massive harvester vessels, designed to strip mine entire planets. 16 fighter carriers. 7 support ships. And 1 dreadnought that dwarfed all the others, its command deck alone larger than Ironhold's entire settlement. Governor Cross stared at the tactical display, his face gray with despair. "Even with the dragons, I don't see how we survive this." Elena looked out the command center window. Dragons filled the sky, hundreds of them positioned in the formations Arya had taught them. The sapphire and silver dragon hovered at the front, her scales gleaming in the sunlight. Other dragons arranged themselves around her, ready to follow her lead. "Maybe survival is not about destroying them," Elena said quietly. "Maybe it is about making them decide we're not worth the cost." The Reaver fleet began its bombardment sequence. Warning shots streaked through the atmosphere, impacting the wasteland beyond the settlement. A message appeared on the communication channels, cold and mechanical. "Colonial settlement designated Ironhold. You have 1 hour to evacuate all personnel to designated extraction points. Resistance will result in immediate termination. This planet has been claimed for resource acquisition." Damien looked at Elena, and she saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. "What do we do?" "We answer," Elena said. She moved to the communication console and opened a channel. "Reaver Fleet, this is Elena Corvus, Chief of Colonial Development. We reject your claim. This world is our home, and we will defend it." Silence stretched for a long moment. Then the mechanical voice returned, tinged now with something that might have been amusement. Defense is futile. You have no military assets. Submit or be destroyed. Aria's roar shattered the air, a sound so powerful it cracked windows in the command center. Every dragon in the sky joined the call, creating a wall of sound that seemed to shake the planet itself. The message was clear. Ironhold was not defenseless. The Reaver fleet adjusted its formation, targeting systems locking onto the dragon swarms. Elena's heart hammered as she watched the tactical display. This was it. The moment that would determine whether Ironhold lived or died. All dragons, Finn spoke into the communication system, his voice steady despite his fear. Execute pattern Aria 1. The dragons moved as one, a coordinated dance that was breathtaking to witness. They split into multiple groups, each formation targeting a different section of the Reaver fleet. Aria led the primary assault group, carrying modified mining charges in specially designed harnesses. The explosives had been rigged with proximity detonators and enhanced with dragon bioluminescent energy, a combination of human technology and dragon ability that neither species could have achieved alone. The Reaver fighters launched, filling space with deadly vessels. But the dragons were faster, more maneuverable. They wove through the defensive fire with impossible grace, their natural abilities allowing them to sense targeting locks before weapons could fire. Elena watched on the displays as dragon after dragon reached their targets, releasing the explosive charges at the last possible moment before banking away. The first harvester vessel shuddered as multiple charges detonated against its hull. Armor plating cracked and atmosphere vented into space. But the ship did not fall. Medical teams to recovery zones, she commanded, her voice cracking. Get those dragons to treatment immediately. The battle raged for hours. Dragons fell, and each loss felt like a knife to Elena's heart. But they did not falter. For every dragon that was wounded, 2 more pressed the attack. They showed a courage and determination that left Elena in awe. These magnificent beings, who owed humanity nothing, were dying to protect a colony that had once feared them. Aria was everywhere, leading charges, coordinating attacks, her sapphire and silver scales flashing like a beacon. Elena tracked her position constantly, relief flooding through her each time she saw the dragon's signature still active on the displays. The tide began to turn when a group of dragons managed to breach the dreadnought's shields. They released their payload directly against the command deck, and the resulting explosion sent the massive ship listing to one side. The Reaver fleet's coordination faltered, their formation breaking as individual ships tried to compensate for the loss of central command. They're vulnerable, Security Chief Brennan said, leaning over the tactical display. If we can press the advantage now. All groups, Finn transmitted. Execute pattern Aria 7. Focus on the harvester vessels. What followed was carnage. The dragons concentrated their remaining explosives on the 3 harvester ships, the vessels that represented the Reaver's ability to strip the planet. Without those ships, the raid became pointless. One harvester exploded in a brilliant flash. The second lost power and began drifting. The third tried to retreat, but dragons pursued it relentlessly until it too was crippled. The Reaver fleet broke. The remaining ships turned and fled, accelerating away from Valdris Prime as fast as their damaged engines would carry them. The dragons did not pursue. They had won not through superior firepower, but through determination and sacrifice. Elena ran from the command center before anyone could stop her. She sprinted through the settlement streets to the landing zone where injured dragons were being treated. Medical teams worked frantically, applying the same techniques Elena had used 4 years ago but on a massive scale. She pushed through the chaos, searching desperately. Aria lay near the center of the zone, her scales dimmed and blood leaking from multiple wounds. Elena fell to her knees beside the dragon, tears streaming down her face. No. No, you have to be okay. The dragon's amber eye opened, focusing on Elena with effort. Aria made a soft sound, and even without translation, Elena understood. Worth it. All worth it. Don't you dare die, Elena sobbed, pressing her hands against the worst wound. Not after everything. You saved us. You saved all of us. Medical teams swarmed around them, working with desperate efficiency. Elena refused to move, staying by Aria's side as they stabilized the injuries. Hours passed in a blur of blood and fear and desperate hope. But slowly, impossibly, Aria's breathing steadied. The dragon's scales began to glow again, faint but growing stronger. When Arya finally lifted her head, Elena laughed through her tears. The dragon made that harmonic sound again, and this time Elena understood perfectly. It meant family. It meant home. It meant that some bonds transcend species and circumstance, forged in moments of compassion and sealed through sacrifice. Governor Cross found Elena sitting beside Arya as dawn broke over Ironhold. The purple sun painted the sky in shades of hope, illuminating a settlement that had survived the impossible. The council wants to establish a formal alliance, Damien said quietly. Between Ironhold and the dragons. A treaty acknowledging our mutual defense and cooperation. Elena looked at Arya, and the dragon dipped her head in agreement. Tell them yes. Tell them we'd be honored. As the colony celebrated their survival and mourned their losses, Elena sat with her hand resting on Arya's warm scales, watching dragons and humans work together to repair the damage. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. For years ago, Elena had shown mercy to a wounded creature. Today, that creature had led an army to save her people. The debt had been repaid 1,000 times over. But it was no longer about debt. It was about something far more profound. It was about family, chosen across the boundaries of species. It was about home, defended by those who valued it above their own lives. And it was about hope, that most precious commodity, which could flourish even in the darkest moments when compassion lit the way.